Welcome to the Global Connection, a Tel Aviv University podcast. Journey with us as we discover how TAU's academic community and friends are engaging with and helping to shape this ever-changing world. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Connection. I am your host, Dr. Anna Sajecki, and today I'm very excited to have with me in the studio Dr. Arjan Boonman, a scientific researcher at Tel Aviv University, where he is currently a member of the Bat Lab for Neuro-Ecology, led by Professor Yossi Yovel. From what I understand, Dr. Boonman originally completed his Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Utrecht University. He then went on to complete a PhD in biology at the University of Bristol, focusing on, from my understanding again, bat signals and echolocation. Is that about right?
Yep.
Okay, great. And then he has also worked with the French National Center for Scientific Research, known as the CNRS, which is the largest science agency in Europe. And I understand, too, you've been in Indonesia for a little bit working at a lab there before coming over here to Tel Aviv University.
Yeah, that's right. Like Indonesia has a lot of bats, so that's what attracted me, obviously.
All right, Indonesia and bats. Well, welcome. I'm very excited to be having a conversation with you today. And you know what? I might even begin there. So tell me about, because I understand you were in Indonesia. You were working with bats there. That's where you met Professor Yossi Yovel.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was kind of the trigger to get you here to Tel Aviv University.
Yeah, because I did a jungle trek with him, and then he said, very likely I'm gonna open a lab in Israel later on. He was in the process by then, and then if I succeed, would you like to join that lab? So I said yes, obviously, because we, of course, discussed a lot of topics in echolocation and sonar while we were recording all those tropical bats, and then we noticed we have very similar ideas, about how the sonar, how it would work, how they would detect landscape insects, and which theories we really didn't like that were around. So, it seemed a good team. And that's why I joined later on.
Okay. I do have to ask, how does the Bat Lab for Neuro-Ecology compare to being in the jungle in Indonesia?
Yeah, much more relaxed to just sit, to just sit and work.
Right.
Without being completely stung to death.
Right.
It's just, you couldn't believe it. You cannot, I had that with Yossi. We could not stop. Yeah, we would be walking, right? And then you stop for 10 seconds. There's one bee, two bees, three. And then in the end, you're just full of bees. Your whole body is full of bees.
Wow.
Because you're sweating.
Okay.
And they want the salt.
Okay.
So they're just, but at some point you move and one of the bees gets stung somehow. Gets,
right.
Somewhere between your clothes.
Right.
And then you get stung and it's you're not in a good...
No. So some
you
people...
have to keep on moving. It's just
okay.
These things. It's just, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Some
people are afraid of getting stung by a bee. I assume after getting stung that many times, you have no fear at all.
Actually, after that, I had a couple of, also in Thailand, that I had massive insects stinging.
Okay.
And I got very bad allergic responses. So now actually I am afraid.
Okay. I do wonder, before you became a biologist and you were thinking of going down that path, did you ever realize that your reality would be getting stung by so many insects in your career?
Yeah, I mean, that's, not the worst.
No. Yeah, you're still here.
And the worst thing is the salary. No, just joking. Yeah.
Okay, I do have to ask. So from what I understand, you grew up in Holland.
Yeah.
That's right. And did you want to go into biology from the time you were a kid?
At a very young age, I wanted to be a train driver.
Okay.
For a long time.
Okay.
And that switched. That's at some point I became a bird watcher, And so I was pretty good already as a kid, especially with sounds. I really liked, and I actually played around with recorders already then. I don't
Okay.
know, even actually when I was interested in trains, I also did that. So I
Okay.
put microphone between the rails, and the train would go over it.
Okay.
You do below the rails, the cable,
Okay. Okay.
and record that. What does it sound like? I already did that.
Okay.
And then I tried to do that on birds.
Okay.
Even like with the long elongation cable and whatever, try to do that kind of things. And then one day, somebody came with a bat detector, which was then like in the Netherlands, they were kind of ahead because, bat detectors had been around, but then they designed an atlas project. And in Holland, they're really fond of making atlases, meaning distribution maps of where insects are, bats are, or birds. This is what they do in Holland. I don't know why, but it's a tradition. And then they thought, hey, these little bat detectors, if we just train hundreds of people to do this, to how to recognize different species, we can make an atlas project on this too. And
Okay.
then somebody came. So that's why all of a sudden, there were more and more bat detectors in Holland, and a group of enthusiasts. Many were ex-bird watchers or still bird watchers. And so they would know the sounds of birds very well and have a hearing for that. And then, a friend came with him. Wow. And you heard these sounds for the first time? Because I knew the bat would always fly circles,
Mhm.
and then I would hear that, wow. And this is, with these sounds, it can see its environment. That's
So
just so, because it sounded so simple. How can it perceive an environment with that? So that's really, like, I knew then, okay, I want to know, I want to be a researcher on this topic. Like, I
and
knew
how
it,
how old were you then? You were in Holland. So you went from train sounds to
14,
bird
I
sounds.
think, 14. And then I knew, like,
14.
yeah,
You were already working on bat sounds at 14. That's
yeah,
incredible. Okay. And for the listeners, that is part of the work that you do today. You focus a lot on acoustics in
yeah.
relation to bats and the type of information we can glean by listening to them. And do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Like how has that evolved then? The type of bat sounds you were recording, listening to in Holland versus sort of what you're listening in on today.
Yeah, well, like when I was in the Netherlands, at some point they were, people abroad saw it like, oh, wow, what is this? Can you actually do this? And many people didn't believe that this would work, that you can turn with this stupid little, because it's like a little radio. It was not a very good bat detector. You would hear a product of the sound, not the original sound. And then, there was a lot of disbelief. And then they organized an international workshop, and they invited me. I was like, very young and like a kid. And the others were all serious professors from all over Europe. So it was a bit, but I was very proud, of course, that I was one of the leaders. So I
Right.
got to lead an international group. And then we showed them, like that you can actually detect colonies. You can find colonies of bats. So you see them coming out, right? And I tell them it's this and this species, and they were like, "Yeah, sure." I hear dick, 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 dick. How can that? And then you run in the opposite direction, like you see they're coming out of this tree, and
Okay.
then okay, no, let's put a net, right? So they catch the bats. They actually catch the, and there's it is Myotis dalbertoni, as the guy said. Wow, and they were really, because we saw what they were writing about it in their local journals or whatever.
Hmm.
Like, wow, you can actually do this. You can actually, it was a revelation. And then it started all over Europe.
Okay.
And so that was like a first step. Yeah. And then
Okay.
after that, I just, completed my, the bachelor degree. But just to, and then
Okay.
I went to the UK where there was a bat lab, a real bat lab, where they officially worked on echolocation.
Okay.
That was the first step too.
And you're working in the Bat Lab here now. So when you think back to those days in Holland, and it sounds like it was almost sort of the initial stage in terms of sound becoming a really prominent way for studying bats, for mapping bats. And then you look at even the global knowledge that we have about bats today in relation to sound. Do you see it as a completely different landscape, the amount of knowledge we have?
Actually, in my perception, to be honest, I just think, wow, it's how like that the progress wasn't so much in my perception, right? How slow things actually
Okay.
progress. This is a strange answer, maybe, but
No, no.
that's like okay. There's so many theories, and but how it actually works, whether they can actually see, because that's my main interest. Can they see, like, if a bat were flying in this room? What would it actually see? Would it see all the slits between the planks on the wall, and like how detailed is the picture? Like that's what you want to know, and we still don't know. It's still the same. It looks
Okay.
like there's so little progress. I know there's been many publications, so it's unfair maybe to say. But you're asking what is your
Right.
perception that it's so slow, as if like nothing really changed.
So I feel like maybe that tells me you're a bit of an ambitious person and you have a vision for where ultimately you'd like the research to go and the type of understanding we have about bats. So if we had a perfect world with the perfect technology and the exact right hypothesis and experiment, for you, what is a big research question when it comes to bats that
Well,
would
what
be
I just
amazing
said,
to?
right? These things, how detailed is the environment, and like sonar is a sound. It's a poor medium, in fact, because the information transmission is very low. If you compare it to vision, you have
Mhm.
two eyes, and so there's so many cells, light receivers on your retina. So it's a two-dimensional information source, coming back the light rays, and there's so many sensors, like as if there's like two cameras with all with all the sensors on it. So that's very rich. So it's easy to see how your image can be so rich and detailed. But with sound, it's a one-dimensional information. You have two ears, but for each ear, there's just one. It's just the wave file. It's just one sensor basically. There's one membrane that's gonna vibrate in the ear, and that's it. That's one sensor. It's a lot of frequencies in it, but so it's much poorer. It's
Okay.
much poorer actually.
Okay.
So it's actually very hard. So what can the maximum information content be? Can you really derive things from the environment and so on? It's um, yeah, of course, it's for engineers, for both engineers and biologists. But I have to say, sometimes engineers are very surprised what bats can do when they see, like, okay, there is a vegetation in the lab, and there's little worms like food on the vegetation, and the bat just hovers around it and gets it. These are things that engineers cannot do. They cannot develop something like this.
Okay.
Another one is underwater, like dolphins, that they can detect mines, and they do it better than whatever robot they design.
Wow.
If the mine is buried under
Mm-hmm.
the soil in the water,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then the dolphin scans and finds it. There's many things, so we can be inspired by nature, as which is, I think, the right way to go. Like to see, oh wow, this animal can do this. How does it do it? And then
Mm-hmm.
you
It
get
is
ideas.
incredible. And I don't have a biology background, but I've always been interested in it. And so I'm aware that there are many, many animals that have a much greater range of hearing than humans do. And, I've heard stories of when there's a tsunami, for instance. I don't know if that's sound waves, but, animals can detect vibrations that humans necessarily can't. And so they can give off early warning signs. Uh, it's so you feel like we're still sort of at the beginning of really understanding all of the depth of um, what animals are paying and mammals are paying attention to that we as humans maybe don't quite get yet.
Yeah, I think every scientist, even like 1,000 years in the future, will say that we're still at the beginning, right? Because that's
Right,
it.
right,
There's
right.
always going to be something else,
Okay,
that we still don't know. There's
okay.
always going to be that.
Now
Like it
I'm
never stops. So like, yeah, sure, yeah.
yeah. I'm going back to my high school biology a little bit when I think about the scientific method. So you start with an observation, you have an hypothesis, and then you plan an experiment, see what happens, go back to your observations and decide sort of, do they align, do they not? So how often, when I'm assuming that you sort of continue to work in that direction, how often are you surprised by the results?
I actually usually I don't care. Like you have to have actually it's interesting what you're saying because this is like a scientific method that is very Anglo-Saxon.
Okay.
Although it was who's this Austrian who came with I
have to go back to my biology teacher and
it's an Austrian philosopher that said this should be the method, right? That you have a hypothesis. And then you can corroborate it or you can refute it, and all the statistical tests hover around that. And this is the big way to go in the Anglo-Saxon world, especially. And but often in my mind, I know that I kind of follow that path because it's like the popular path.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really the hypothesis that I formulate. It's not really, I don't care. Like it could be another one and I just say, okay, and I just do the research and then I see if it confirms or not, but I don't really have an opinion.
Okay.
I just like neutral.
Okay.
But I want to explain something that in reality, many people explore, there is an exploration phase where you just say, I don't have an hypothesis, especially now with big data,
Right.
So you get big data about whatever. So it can be microphones, cameras, that basically we're spying on each other all day long, right?
Right.
That's big data.
Right.
And then do you have a hypothesis on it? And I think many people don't. They just, some insurance company maybe has their own hypotheses or whatever.
Okay.
But you want to see what can we do with this data? You explore, right? And so that's very different from that standard philosophy.
Okay. And do you feel like that is really growing in terms of the approach? It's more about maybe having different scenarios and then having the data that you can collect from that scenario and interpreting that data.
I think it's just later on that you see the data and then you do have hypotheses on it, like maybe if this age group so-and-so, then whatever, then you formulate some kind of relationship. But actually, sometimes you can just do all sorts of correlations and say, hey, this is a strong relationship that you find by chance.
Okay.
Maybe research will change a little bit because of this, because of big data.
Mm-hmm.
It will change a little bit, but it's already, when, light is both a wave and a particle, which hypothesis was confirmed, like which hypothesis was right?
Mm-hmm.
Both were right. So you already know that from the past that it's not so black and white, you know?
Right.
But still, it's a good, I'm not saying we're throwing it all away, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's still this rigorous testing based on statistics.
Okay.
But I think it's getting broader, this way, the approach of scientific research.
Okay. And I imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a big part of it too is really working in a global community of biologists, ecologists, scientists who are working on similar areas. So when you're working on a particular experiment, how much do you feel like you're part of this bigger group working towards a larger idea or concept or understanding? And how much of it is you just in the lab looking at data?
I've always, nearly my entire life, felt that I belong more. I think this is really normal nowadays, that you belong to a group rather than to a country or anything.
Okay.
Like that you feel like you meet other people, could be Koreans or I don't know. And then at some point, this is also liberal people who are interested, who are kind of, read books or are interested in science. And then you just feel a connection. That's what I have.
Okay.
It doesn't and it's actually more interesting if they're from some country that you don't really know.
Okay.
So yes, I have always felt like that. And many labs are international. Actually, the lab I'm in now, there's 2 Chinese, there was somebody from Serbia, there's it's who else? Italian, German, and me. I'm from Holland. So Like it's a mixed, and
Okay.
English is like everybody speaks English,
Right.
and you
Right.
learn so much, like when here in Israel there were many demonstrations. Of course, there's every week,
Mm-hmm.
and one Chinese friend from the lab, he said, "What is a demonstration?"
Mm.
And I had to explain to him like, in China this is illegal. And then I asked him, "Do you want to come? You want to come to the demonstration?" So he said yes. So he thought it was amazing, and
Okay.
it was raining and people were still going on. They really believe in their ideal, And
Right.
then at some point we went to the highway. All of a sudden we were kind of pushed onto the highway, and
Yeah.
he even made it to television, like,
Wow. He was on the Island Highway. That's
yes.
a bold place to be. And you bring up a really great point because, these labs are international in terms of the research, but at the same time, they're like these little microcosms of the world where it's also about different cultures coming together and you
Yeah.
can learn so much from each individual and where
Yeah.
they're
And
from. And
I think all of my students are Arabs.
yeah.
So of course, and many are Druze,
Hmm.
and some are Muslim, Christian. So of course, I asked them a million questions. Of course,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
often say we don't really represent. Like when I go back to the village, I don't really represent. Like the others are not so liberal; they're very conservative. I have to change my clothes and everything. So, but yeah, they warn you that they're not representative of their culture, but still you can learn a lot from them, and I really like it. It's one of my things that I learned here. That's because there's Jews and Arabs, and the connection. I mean, the
Mhm.
history of it is not beautiful, maybe, but this, if you want to really interact and you want to really, be on the same level and like interact as equals, I mean, I'm not saying you have to have confrontations all day, but you shouldn't just not don't mention this, don't mention that. That's not what is happening here.
Mhm.
Like in the
Mhm.
lab, they
Mhm.
discuss things.
Mhm.
I just walked past it, and they were discussing abortion with a guy who's a Muslim, and the girls were like very clear on this, that
Right.
this is a right, and they were arguing, and then okay, I'm not saying he went home totally believing in abortion, but it's just very important that he heard it once, and that Jews hear other things,
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's things you don't realize, but that, for example, that same guy, he's a trained guy. He does fighting sports and so on, and he's to some people that's intimidating, right?
Mhm.
And then he can only express anger in his own village. But when he's in Tel Aviv, and he would shout something like so many people do from their car, right?
Right.
But
Right.
then with his accent, he can't do that.
It's a
He
different
can
reception.
because
Yeah.
people would react just because they hear the accent,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
not the same. It's his life is not this, and you don't think about that.
Yeah.
You don't, and they
Well,
tell you, right? You hear and you learn. Okay, what is it like for the other person?
yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's a beautiful thing about a university, and it's universities everywhere, right?
Yeah, and
We really
this
are
is
these.
international too,
Yeah.
because, for example, Queen's University in Belfast,
Hmm.
even in the worst troubles, they called it in
Right.
the 70s, I think.
Hmm.
It was, I'm not saying it's the perfect world, right? But they were working together, Protestant and Catholics, and it was,
There's
it's,
spaces of coming together.
yeah, like
Definitely.
usually universities are the last vestiges of, I don't know, like maybe also sports and music, or I don't know, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
scientists, yeah, for sure. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I like to think of it maybe not as a vestige, but a place of hope,
yeah,
something, something forward looking,
yeah,
definitely. So there's that sense of a global community in the lab itself. And then you were mentioning you are often working with other international researchers. So are there partnerships going on with other universities? Is that common, especially with the Bat Lab? Are you working with other universities too?
yeah. I guess it depends on your lab. In Israel is a bit. I mean, to work together with Jordanians or Lebanese or is a bit hard here, but yeah, we had. If it were easy, then we would be doing that all the time, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, so we had cooperations with the Germans. Now there's people they're cooperating in Mexico. Just thinking, not sure which universities are involved, but surely institutes in Mexico. So yeah, that's happening a lot. In Germany they have these wind tunnels which you can use for bats and birds. So that's, there's sometimes unique contraptions or whatever that they have over there. With Thailand, we had a lot of, like, there's a university in Thailand where they also do bat research, and we were there a lot.
Okay. So I have to ask too, how, and maybe it's a large question, hopefully it's not too large, but how different are bat colonies and communities around the world? So when you're looking at Thailand, you're looking at Mexico, you're looking at Israel, are you looking, not to make a bad pun, but at an entirely different beast in each situation?
The numbers of species or like
Numbers of species, the way the colonies interact with each other.
so if you go closer to the equator, the number of species tends to grow rapidly. So in Israel, it's already, because it's a little bit further south, and it's the border, a kind of, how do you say, a geophysical border or something, also for birds, for many animals. So many animals, they have their southernmost range in Lebanon and just the northern part of Israel.
Okay.
It's the same for bats. It's also true for many birds, like the wren, the tiny bird that you don't have them in Tel Aviv, wrens, but you do have them in Haifa.
Okay.
Right? So all of a sudden, it's like you cross the border.
Right.
And it's,
right. And they're
it's a
right
kind
there.
of invisible border
Okay.
that exists, that goes through Israel, and it's the same for bats. And there's, even there is a tropical group of bats, Taphozoas. It's from Embolonouridae, and it's Israel. It's the northernmost range. So they're still in northern Israel, but I'm not sure. In Lebanon, I guess when you go to the higher mountains, we don't know, but I would be surprised that I don't think they're there.
Okay.
And this is a tropical group of bats that's only in the equator. So generally, the equator has far more species.
Okay.
And Israel alone has about the same number of species as the whole of Europe. So it shows something. And then you go further south, and especially if there is forests and so on, you get a lot more species. And what's also, especially regarding bats, what's interesting is their hibernation patterns. Because classical hibernation that we learn at school, that's a story from the northern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's true for Canada and true for the northern United States.
They don't hibernate here then.
Yeah, many don't.
Wow,
So in Europe, of course, what bats do is Northern Europe, right? Is go so they go down to 4 degrees. Their heartbeat is very low, 1 beat per minute. Maybe I have to look it up, but it's very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
Breathing, everything 4 degrees centigrade, needs to be a humid place. Some bats just hang like that for months. That's very northern. That's a very northern, but most bats of the world live in the tropics. Okay. So they don't have winter. Right? So they don't do this.
Therefore, they don't need to hibernate.
Interestingly, I was so stupid the first week in Indonesia when I was there, and I said, where do we put the bats overnight? So in the fridge, I was stupid because, of course, but they did it because they think, the foreigner knows, right? So they put them in the fridge, pipistrelles, but it was a different Pipistrellus javanicus from Java, from that tropical. And the next day, they were fine. They just woke up from torpor from the fridge. Okay. Because it's the same genus as in Europe. So apparently, by accident, we learned something. Oh, they didn't die, because apparently this genus, even though they never experienced that it's no problem. The torpor can deal with this.
Okay.
Interesting, right?
Well, it makes me wonder if when it comes to climate change, if they'll be one of the better adapters.
Yeah, many families will not. Many tropical bats for sure. They cannot. And now we know this. Also through Israeli researchers from Tel Aviv University, by the way, they found out that there are groups of bats that are find their northern range here, and they have a completely different way of going. They can't really go lower than 17, 18 degrees centigrade, their body temperature. And if you do that, they would start to warm up just like humans, right? If you go into a fridge,
Okay.
you will maintain 37 centigrade, right? You'll
Right.
and spend all your energy. That's what these bats do as well. They keep on spending energy in that to keep it to 17 degrees. But so their normal pattern is that ambient temperature doesn't really drop so much lower, and it's a different way of being in hibernation.
Okay.
So it's a whole different system.
Okay.
And those bats couldn't live in extreme cold climates.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are different strategies, right? Some bats that in Europe go into hibernation. In Israel, they just hunt all year round.
Okay.
They just, and then, they hunt maybe for only 2 hours or 1 hour in the evening and then go back and then go into torpidity. But they have different, so it's much more flexible.
Right.
So actually the standard, like what most bats do, is not what you learn at school. That's interesting. And there is a lot, like we don't really know because most researchers are in the Northern Hemisphere.
Okay.
Right? So this is what, and then you need to, but it's going to happen.
Okay.
A friend of mine just got a position and she's really into this.
Okay.
I'm sure she will now find out.
So we're finding out more and more about bats in the Southern Hemisphere then. We're just about out of time, so I want to thank you very, very much for being here today, and I look forward to watching out for your future research.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.
Bye.